All right, hi guys, welcome to Whitehall Pottery. My name is Heidi Jacobs. I'm going to be demonstrating some pottery for you today. It's been a minute since I enjoyed the live streams. Sorry for the video quality. It looks like it's a little bit pixelated. But once I change cameras, it should improve. We'll see though. Hope everybody's having a great day so far and enjoying everyone prior to me. After me, you'll get the privilege of Jake Thompson, which is really exciting, a good buddy of mine. It's been really fun the last few, I guess we've been doing this for 2 years now, I think. But it's been really fun to participate in this, and I just want to thank Jamie and Carl and everyone that has worked so hard to keep this thing going. It's been a lot of fun. I hope everybody has really enjoyed this community and found out some new ways of working and interesting hobbies, so to speak. But today I'm going to be throwing some tankards and some mugs. One of the tankards you've probably been seeing if you follow my social media are the Public Lands taller kind of basic tankards, and then we'll be throwing ones with a little foot and some mugs as well. I am super excited to be here. I don't want to take up too much time just pontificating, so let's go ahead and let's get muddy. Now you'll just have to bear with me because I am the only one manning my cameras, so there might be a little bit of a delay between camera action. But we'll start off with, this is probably about a pound of clay here. And this makes a decent sized mug, about, I would say 18 ounces. And yes, I'm American, so I speak in weird math for those of you in the UK. My volume skills, I can't convert, so I'm in ounces. And we're going to change that because that one's a pain in the bat. Hey, Carl. So this is called a bat, and these are pins. And these bat pins basically hold the bat in place. They're drilled directly into my wheel head, and it serves as a chuck. And the only thing holding the clay on there is suction. So when I throw this ball of clay onto the pottery wheel, it will start to secure itself to place. When I start centering, it'll lock into place a lot better. Whoop. And I'm using a little bit of water as a lubricant. And this technique is just centering. So I'm coning up and I'm flattening out. This is the cone up. I'm using my palms to get most of the pressure, and I'm pulling it up into a cone shape, and I'm pushing it down into a puck shape. And what this does is it works the clay so that all of the moisture and the air bubbles and everything get dispersed evenly. The air bubbles usually work themselves out. And as a practice potter, I can feel the difference. I can feel when it's out of center. My hands would go like this. If I were on the side of it and it was out of center, I would also feel a bubble on the top if there were any bubbles coming up to the top, but right now there isn't. So the next step in throwing is to just create my hole. Now, when I am thinking about this, I don't want to go straight down into the piece, as it will impact my center. So what I'm going to want to do is go in at an angle. So both hands, as I work, are going in at an angle until I am ready to start flattening the bottom out and pulling the sides up. Now I'm going to go ahead down in with 3 fingers. This is just how I do it. The thumb is just there as support to keep it in place. I'm just going rather slowly because this clay is a little bit harder than I normally throw it. And I'm reinforcing the rim as I come up. The reason I'm doing that is because it will help to prevent cracks in the future. And now that I have my base, I'm going to go ahead and widen the bottom. So I'm just pulling my fingers towards my body. And that's creating my bowl shape or my flat, depending on if I am making a mug or a bowl. If I'm making a bowl, my action isn't straight. It's more concaved or convex, I guess. So I'm scooping if I'm making a bowl, but I'm coming straight if I'm making a mug or a tankard. The next thing is to create my walls. So this action is called pulling up. So technically I'm pulling up my walls. Hey, Ben, that's my husband, slap stuff together. Each action, I'm reinforcing the rim again. This just really helps to reinforce that rim and make sure that it's nice and compressed. And every action I take, I finish out. So I don't just start pulling part of it up and then not finish the action. This also helps me to keep things even. Centrifugal force will try and pull the walls out so that they're kind of flanging out. I'm not ready for any of that action yet. I still want my walls to come straight up. I can correct any of that by going straight in and using my palm on my outside hand to keep that positioned in. And if you start to see a little bit of a wave on the top, that's just showing that it came off a little bit of center. We can correct that after we're done throwing. And I use a good bit of water. Some potters don't use any water. They use a very, very soft clay when they throw. And I'm just continuing to pull up the walls. As I'm pulling up the walls, they're getting thinner and thinner. So I want to be very careful that I don't bust through a wall by pressing too hard. I'm going to go ahead and change the camera angle so you can see the height of the piece as well. So let's go here, adjust my camera. There you go. So we're about a pretty good mug height. I'm just going to manipulate it one more time, just to give it a rounder shape. Again, compressing the rim. There was an air bubble in the bottom. I popped it, but now it's got a little bit of a wobble. You can see it as it comes around. It's like, woo, woo, woo. Hope you like sound effects. So I've got this straight edge tool. It's just a piece of walnut that has been treated, and it's called a potter's knife. So it's got a pointy end. It's not super sharp. I've dulled it a bit by use, but the edge is kind of sharp. It comes to an angle that allows me to cut through the clay. But the purpose that I'm going to use this for right now is to straighten out the sidewall. So I want to remove any kind of residue that's going to create any kind of indentation in my clay. And then I'm just going to stick my piece right up against it. Use my other hand to support the wall and push them together. And this is going to straighten my wall and remove a lot of that what's called slurry. So I'm going to remove that slurry. And then I've got another tool to clean up the bottom. So this is called pre-trimming. As you can see, it's just an angular tool. This is metal. It is sharp. It has cut me a few times. It's not so fun. And then I'm just going to insert that in the bottom very slowly. And I'm just going to trim that bottom away. You can make it round. You can make it straight. You can go in and just make it the shape of the angle. So it's just right down in there. But the goal is to get all of the excess clay on the bottom removed. Now I can go back and trim this later on my Giffen grip, which looks like a giant chuck. We talked about it before, and I can show it to you later. But the purpose of doing the pre-trim is that I'm not wasting all that excess clay, and I can get a better idea of what this piece is going to look like while it's still on my wheel. Ben, it's brown clay. It is called Standard 112, and it is a cone 6 clay. So I'm going to use this needle tool to remove some of that wobble that you're seeing on the rim. It's not severe, but it's enough that it won't lay flat if you turn it upside down when you're trimming on the wheel. So I'm just going to remove that little bit of excess. And the next thing I want to do with that rim is go back in and recompress it, because now it's got a little bit of a torn area. So let me change the camera back so you can kind of see what that has looked like. And I'm just going to recompress. And round it over with my fingers. There we go. And then that piece is pretty much done. It's a very simple form. Obviously, it's just a cylinder with a little bit of a round underneath. And this makes one of my typical Pittsburgh mugs that I sell at local gift shops. And that uses about a pound of clay, sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less. I use a kitchen scale to electronic kitchen scale to get my ounces of material just right so I can throw consistently. I'm a small batch potter, so I don't do a whole lot of experimenting with new forms and shapes. I don't make too many vases. I do like doing raku, but it's pretty much held to maybe once a year. So I do experiment there, but I don't do a whole lot of experimentation with my normal pottery unless it's an order from a client. All right. So this is a clay from Sheffield Pottery. It's very similar to the 112 from Standard. It does not have a manganese additive in it, so it doesn't get freckling. I don't think I have a piece that I can share with you what that looks like, the freckling, that you can really see it. Maybe my coffee cup on the bottom here. No, I can't really see it. But basically what happens with the manganese in there is it burns out so that it's a dark, dark black. And as a result, you got freckles through your glaze. And I really like that look, so it's a clay that I typically use. Last year, there was a huge clay shortage around Christmas time, so I had to order my clay in from Sheffield Pottery, which is in Missouri, I believe. And that's quite a haul to ship, you know, a couple 100 pounds of clay. So I had to pay a premium, which wasn't the greatest. And it has grog in it. So basically grog is like sand. But the clay did not have manganese, so it just fired to like a really nice light brown buff color. It's nice to throw. It's very comfortable. I like it. I have some left. It's about 100 pounds I have left of it. So I use it for the tankards that I pretty much cover the whole thing in glaze. So these tankards are going to be for an event coming up at Tatty Bogle. And if you watch any of Franco's videos, you probably are familiar with their cider. They're local to me, only about an hour away. And they're doing an event this year on August 13th, I believe. It's like artisan craft fair. So I believe Tim's going to be there, and I'm going to be there, and Franco, and all the cider. And I'm very excited. So I wanted to make some tankards for that event. And you know what? I'm going to change my angle of the camera so you can see me pull up the walls. A better view for this action. So you can see it get taller. I'll go to the other side so I'm not blocking the whole camera view. Boo. So all I want to do here is just make a really tall cylinder. This again is just a pound of clay. So I'm going to make one of my shorter tankards for this. And I can leave the finger marks in, which a lot of potters end up doing, so you can really tell that it's thrown. But I typically do not, because I like to add embellishments on the outside, which makes it easier if it's a smoother piece. So embellishments like underglazed decals or little crease that I cut out and apply that I call badges. Or maybe I add like the trail texture that I did on the public lands mugs. Oh, you're not going to make it. Oh, darn, Tim, that stinks. I was hoping to see you. All right, so my next step is I am going to do my pre-trimming now, and I probably will do this twice. So all I do is just go into the bottom of the piece, remove that excess clay. The reason I'm doing that is that I want to see the form as I'm making it. I think what I'm going to do is kind of like a bellied out bottom with a skinnier top into a flanged neck. So you've got a nice lip rest as a result. And all I'm doing is I'm using my inside fingers to kind of push out, and my outside fingers are pushing in. And as I go up the piece, I'm just directing the clay where I want it to go. So now we've got like our hourglass shape there, which I was hoping for. I'm just reinforcing that rim, making it smooth again. And when I do that, I use two fingers, like, I don't know, Girl Scouts? 2 fingers though. Going around that rim using my thumb and my pointer finger to pinch and guide it so that I can get a really clean adjustment there. And I'm going to go back in because I do want to get that bellied out a little bit more on the bottom. While I'm going up, I'm also checking to make sure that my walls are completely the same thickness all the way up the piece. As you get advanced as a potter, you can really feel the difference. So if you go from like a wall that's thin to a thicker wall to a thinner wall, you can feel it with the tips of your fingers. So you're going up and then, ooh, and then yes, I do. I try and lock my elbows into my body. I don't want to fatigue my arms, Amy. A lot of things that new potters do is they try and use all of their strength in their fingers and their forearms and their shoulders to push the clay around. But what you really want to do is use all of your body to do that. I lean on the pottery wheel. I have my elbows into my hips, and I'm locking all of that weight like this. And then my fingers are just used as extensions. So it makes it a lot easier to throw a lot more during the day. I'm not as fatigued, in other words, and it's a lot less stress on my shoulders. All right, so we've got our fun little shape here, and what I will probably do with this one is put a decal on the side that has something witchy brew or something like that for Halloween. But it's a fun little shape to do. And that was about a little over a pound of clay. I'm gonna grab one of these larger pieces of clay that's 1.5 pounds. So 1.5 pounds is 1 pound and 8 ounces. And this clay is a bit wetter than the original clay that I was throwing with to start off with, so it does move a little easier for me, and I can throw it a good bit faster. Again, I'm just adding some moisture to the bat itself, and that clicking is because my bat isn't all the way down to the wheel head. Go ahead and pop that down on there. Add some water and start centering. When I'm centering, most of the force is coming from my torso. Again, just don't want to fatigue my arms and my shoulders. And I'm using mostly the palm of my hand to control the clay. So both palms are pushing on opposite sides, and then I'm pushing harder and harder and harder to get my cone shape. And then I'll push down to work that clay so that all of the air bubbles are pushed out. Everything gets evenly set in the moisture area. And I'm pretty much centered here. So I want it to be shaped like a hockey puck. So we've got a flat top, straight sides. I don't want to have a big pile of clay that sticks out. It's harder to control. Plus you end up wasting a ton of clay when you do that. And I don't need my puck to be that wide, so right now I'm just kind of pushing it in to raise the height of my puck before I build my hole. So let me go ahead and change camera angles so you can see overhead view. And I'm just going down in again at a slight angle so I'm not throwing my clay off center. I'm going down till I have about a 1/4 of an inch of clay on the bottom. If you are a new potter and you're like, how do you know that you're at a 1/4 inch? What you can do is, hey Jim, what you can do is remove your moisture from the bottom of your clay, and our handy dandy needle tool that I lost somehow when it was right in front of me. You just take your needle tool and stick it down into the clay, and then use your pointer finger to measure so I know that I've got about a 1/4 of an inch of clay still left there. And don't worry, that little hole is going to fill itself as I put pressure back down into that space. And I'm just going to start to widen out the mouth of my clay. I want my walls to be straight up and down, not bowled out. This is going to be one of the taller tankards. And what I'm doing with my fingers is I'm going straight down into the side, and then I'm curling them slightly to push the walls so I get more of an angle on the bottom. Some people use a tool for this. It kind of looks like a, well, it is PVC pipe, where they just put it down over top the edge and pull across, and it flattens their bottom out, and it makes sure that they're at the depth of clay that they want. I've been doing this for a while, so I don't typically need something like that, but it probably would have been handy for me as starting out. And all I'm going to do now is start pulling up my sides. Again, reinforcing my rim with every move and making sure I'm completing the movement all the way through. And this has a good bit more grog, so my hands feel a little bit crusty. Go back to this other view for you so you can see me pull up the walls. Hand's going to be in the way for a second here, just checking my thickness. And I have a foot pedal that I'm using to adjust my rate of speed. This is the max speed, and this is the lower amount of speed that you can do. And your pull-up should be about the same speed up as your wheel is turning. Excuse me. Hey, Red. So I'm positioning my fingers so that the inside fingers are up a little bit higher than the outside fingers. And that creates a shelf as I'm pulling up the clay. It's making it so that there is that little excess of clay from the bottom is being pushed all the way up the top, which is thinning out my walls and making my piece taller. And sorry if you can hear my dogs barking or my kid yelling. This is where I live. I don't have a separate studio. All right, so we're gonna do a couple more pulls up. It's still pretty thick. Just take your time. The more clay you have, obviously the more material that you're pushing and pulling and throwing and centering and everything else. So don't be shy if it takes you a little bit more time as you increase the amount of clay. It's going to take more effort to move that amount of material. Just be patient, don't rush it. As soon as you start rushing it, you throw it off center and then have to start over. So we'll do one more pull up here and reassess where we're at. Ooh, I like the finger marks in this one. I think I can get it a little bit taller, and then we'll start with our embellishments that we want to make, creating a foot and a lip rest. So we'll talk about this next tool. It's called a rib. And it's called a rib because it's basically shaped like a rib. And they come in all different materials. You can make your own. Some people make them out of credit cards. Some people make them out of wood. Some people buy them. Some people use aluminum metal. I have this one. It is, again, walnut. And I like it because I like a good rigid rib for cutting a foot. So this has a little mouth that I use the Dremel tool to cut out. And it's got a hole in it, so it's a little bit easier to hold on to. You put your fingers, pinch it. I can use the straight edge to straighten out a piece. I can use this part to round out a bowl. I can use this part as a straight edge as well, but why I cut this little fish mouth on here is to create a foot, a rounded foot in the bottom of the pieces. So I'm going to do that just by inserting it slightly while the wheel is turning and giving a slight amount of pressure until I see that become really smooth and rounded shaped. And then I'm going to remove the tool. So I've got all this excess clay here. I'm going to clean that off, and I'm going to slowly round the wheel to make sure that I didn't have any tear out or cracking or anything else. And if I do, I'll just reinsert the tool to smooth it out. You can add a little bit of water to it. And then that's pretty much how the foot is made. Yes, I still do slipping and scoring when attaching handles, Amy, and that is at the point where these pieces would be leather hard. You don't want to try and apply any kind of handles or embellishments without the clay being a little bit harder, because otherwise you're going to distort your vessel. All right, so the next thing I want to do is, see, there's all that excess clay that's built up here. I'm just going to remove that with my fingers. And what I like about these tankards is, again, I push out the bottoms a little bit with my inside fingers to give it that nice rounded shape on the bottom. As I'm going up, I'm pushing in so that I'm getting more of an angular shape. When I get up to the lip, I'm going to slowly pull back out. So then I start to get a little bit of a flanged experience there. I'm going to, again, reinforce my rim. And that's how that piece starts to come together. The next part is I'm going to remove some excess slip and slurry with my sponge, or I can use my straight edge tool. And I've got water built up in the inside. Let me go to that other angle so you can see it. I've got too much clay on my mouse, so it doesn't want to be visible. All right, my camera adjusted. Oh, you can't really see it, but there's a big puddle of water in the bottom. So I'm just going to take the sponge. I'm going to go down inside and remove that excess liquid with the sponge. Just super simple. Clean that out. While I'm doing that, I'm also pushing on the wall a little bit to round that edge out. The sponge does a good job of correcting any finger embellishments. I'm also pushing down at the same time just to make sure that my bottom is compressed. This will help with what are called S cracks as it dries. And then this piece is pretty much completed. Now, one thing that I can also do for this, if I don't like that the flange is really present enough, or I want it to be more decorative as well, is I can take my pointer and thumb and compress the rim a little bit on its side to create a more obvious indent. And I'm just letting the wheel go and using my fingers to kind of manipulate that clay. I'm going to go on the outside just below the indent, and I'm going to make it more obvious. So let me go ahead and take my sponge to round that out, smoothing it out pretty well. And here we go. So now you can see that the lip is a little bit more evident and more decorative. When I apply the handle, I'll use a tool like this. It's called a serrated rib. You can see the serrations. And then I will just create score marks in both places where I want the handle to be attached. And I'll do the same on the handle itself. And then I'll add some slip, which is basically just this leftover slurry from throwing. And it acts as a glue. And it'll fuse those two pieces together. The biggest thing that you want to do, Amy, is when you're attaching your embellishments or handles, you want to make sure that they're the same dryness. So you don't want to attach a leather hard or over hard handle to a really soft piece. They'll dry at different rates, and then the handle will fall off or the piece will crack. All right. So one other thing that I am doing is I'm making whiskey sippers. So a friend of mine has a wedding coming up for her son, and she asked for 32 whiskey sippers. So what I'll do is I'll probably throw more like 38, just in case something goes wrong. Jay Whiz, in my content notes, you will see all of the links for everybody who's there. And next up is going to be Jake. Let's see, I have a little banner I made here. Da-na-na-na. Stay tuned for Jake Thompson up next. And there's the link to his channel. So you should be able to see that. I made these funky little banners and I didn't even use them. Darn it. All right, so let's I haven't played around with these yet. So let's see. I think we'll start off with a pound of clay. This might be a little short, a pound. And we'll get to play here. And all I am doing, again, is just centering the piece. How often do I clean the wheel? No, not very often. I don't change my clay too often, so, and I throw almost every day, so it doesn't really bode me well to like clean the whole thing. I might scoop out the clay and toss it in a bucket and reclaim it as it gets to be high. But I don't actually like spend a whole lot of time worried about what it looks like. If you follow a lot of potters on Instagram, a lot of them have like a really clean, beautiful studio. That's not me. I'm a production potter, and it doesn't have to be pretty for me. So what I'm thinking with these is that I will make them kind of thick-walled so they feel like something hefty to hold, and that you'll be able to just really feel like you're enjoying a beverage out of a higher end piece. And I think one version I did not too long ago was just a straight walled piece. Instead of having any kind of belly out or anything like that, it just went straight up like a cylinder. And honestly, that's probably one of the harder things to throw is a straight piece. But I'm only going to go up a couple of inches, maybe 6 inches. No, that's not even 6. That's more like 4. So let's go to this other view for you. Yeah, I think that'll make for a fine height. And as clay dries, it starts to shrink. And when it shrinks, it's pushing all of the water out of the sides. So the clay molecules are coming closer and closer and closer together. And the water molecules are evaporating. Now, if it's humid, it takes a lot longer for it to dry, and the humidity in the air will still affect the clay. So we do what's called a bisque fire to completely remove the moisture and prep it so that you can glaze it. Now, during a bisque fire, you're not firing it to the full temperature. You're only firing it to halfway almost. And that allows you to apply what's called glaze. And glaze is basically a powdery group of minerals that's been weighed out very specifically so that you get the result that you want, whether by a commercial vendor or yourself. And there's water added to that. The water will then pull into the material, and as it pulls into the material, it will pull some of those minerals into the clay itself. And as it's fired, the water evaporates and the minerals stay behind, and they fuse into the clay surface. And depending on how much silica is in it, is how glassy or glossy it becomes. So you're basically creating a fine layer of glass on the outside of your stoneware pottery, or your porcelain, if you choose to work in porcelain. All right, so we've got, it's a very simple form, right? We've used our straight edge to create the straight tall part. I didn't create a bellied bottom. Instead, I just used the angle from my tool to create a V shape underneath. And this would be a nice whiskey sipper. I like it because it's got a really thick rim and a really thick wall. So in theory, in my head, if you like your whiskey on the rocks, it'll stay cool. But there's that piece. Pretty simple. So you saw it didn't take me too long to throw that. If I'm not talking, if I'm not presenting, I can throw them in about a minute each, maybe 2 minutes each, depending. All right. So that's one version. Let's try another that's a little more feminine. Yeah, you know, they reached out to me in the springtime and said, do you have any ideas for something that would be a nice gift for all of the wedding party and for like close family that helped at the wedding? So it was, it felt like a no-brainer to make whiskey sippers. No problem, Amy. It really helps me along to like know what to talk about. So my studio is in my house and I have air conditioning. The reason I'm telling you that is because at different times of year in different locations around the world, it's going to be a different amount of time for things to set the way that you need to for the different steps. So for me in my studio, if I wanted to attach handles on these, I would do it if I didn't put plastic over it to like keep the moisture in. If I left them sit out, it would be a few hours for me to wait until the pottery was ready for me to attach handles and do all that jazz. The next step, which would be bisque firing, would be about a week, unless I put a fan on everything to help push along the drying process. Then it would be just a few days. But even then, there's a risk that I don't let things dry enough, especially if I've got a lot of moisture trapped between pieces. Like say I put a bunch of embellished badges on things, then there's a lot of slip moisture that's in between the badge and the clay of the vessel. So this is a bit too big for a zipper, I think. But we'll just keep playing because it's fun. Let's just make this like a flower pot. There we go. Nothing's wasted. Nothing is wasted. I've got some excess clay, so let's put a foot on the bottom of this. Let's belly it out pretty good. Make it really, really round. Get a lot of soil in there for your little plants. And when I am ready, since this is going to be a flower pot now instead of a whiskey sipper, I will put a hole in the bottom for a drainage. And make a little cute little flower pot, starter pot. And this is what I use to make the hole. So it's got a sharp point, and then you work it down through the clay. You want to do it while it's a little over leather hard, so you don't distort the piece. And if it's too hard, it'll just crack the bottom. That was not used for drinking. I got carried away and made it too big. The whiskey sipper that we made before, the one with the straight sides, is for drinking alcohol. There we go. So I also make mini cups and things too for espresso. But these are a little bit bigger than the espresso cups. Let's see. 1 pound, 1 pound, half pounds. And the reason I start with a ball of clay, it's just a little bit easier to throw with. So that's just how that is. Some people start with cones. I learned to just make balls of clay at certain weights. So coning up, pressing down. The other thing that I did for a wedding were lidded vessels. So I made them smaller than a cookie jar, wider than a normal mug, and then I turned lids for them, and Ben also helped me turn some of the lids. And then for Christmas I did them as well, except we used our laser to put in really unique lace patterns on the top, so it made them super fancy. Super fancy. All right, so with a lot less clay, should be able to make this flange zipper that I want to make. I have it in my head, it's hard to describe. So it's just straight up wall sides, and then it kind of Y's out on the top. Coming along, coming along. Let me change the angle for you. Yep. I'm going to throw it with the wheel turned down a little bit so that I can guide it better the way that I want. You can see I'm starting to create that Y shape. But in the midst of that, I may have thrown it off center a little bit. But that's no problem. All right. I've got extra moisture in the bottom and extra moisture on the side. So we'll get rid of that. Now the question is, what do I want to do with the bottom of this? And to me, I just want to get rid of this excess clay. But what ends up happening is I start to get a little bit of a ridge on the bottom, which I like the look of. So I'll use my finger to round that out. And I want that to kind of emulate what's happening in the top. So I'll get rid of some of that excess clay with my fingers and come back with my tool again. To me, and in terms of what I studied in school, is a more feminine shape is something with curves. So this obviously has curves, so it's more feminine in description. All right, so now I've got this fun shape, which will be fun to hold too. Like if you think when you're working on the wheel and kind of sketching in 3D like we are today, you can kind of picture how that's going to feel to hold, what it's going to feel like to drink out of. Is it going to make a mess when you try and drink out of it? Like, is it going to be comfortable for your mouth? If you're just using it to sip out of, if you're using it to gulp out of, like a tankard, you know, you're trying to chug as much beer as you can. If you drink like my dad. And there you go. So we've got a fun little shape. Will be comfortable to hold. Nice rim on it. When it pops off, I've got a little bit of extra material on the bottom, so I might trim a foot in the bottom so that it's got an indented center. All right, so I've got time to probably throw one more piece, and then we can move to a couple of questions before Jake Thompson takes over. Oh, let me do my banner. First, like and subscribe. And stay tuned for Jake Thompson up next. And you can get to his page by searching Jake Thompson. And if you are interested in anything I'm making here, you can visit my website at www.whitehallpottery.com. And I've got some wares on there if you want to order. It's harder for me to ship to the UK. So if you don't have that option on the website, just shoot me a message and we can work something out. So we'll just throw one more piece and I'll do it pretty quick so that we can have some question and answer time. Yeah, I think so. It says Broom Lane. It's a Halloween sign. All right. I feel a bubble. I popped it. I popped the zip. How long have I been throwing? 5 years. I've been throwing regularly. But I built my first pottery wheel more like 10 years ago. And I studied ceramics and sculpture in college. So I've been working in clay for a lot longer. I won't tell you when I went to college. I aged myself. All right. A little bit. All right. There we go. Last piece for the show. All right, let me change my view here. Hi. Well, thank you so much for stopping by. We've got a few more minutes. If anybody has any additional questions they want to ask about the pottery or what I do or how I got started, we've got a few more minutes for that before you head off to see Jake do. Again, thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Carl. Thank you, Dale. Thank you, everybody else participating. There's a long list of people, so I don't want to lose anybody in that brain freeze. Then made me these bats out of countertop, and they're working out really well. I really like them. I used to use hardy board, but it got over time warped and the fibers would come up. Do I do this full time? No, I Unfortunately, I do not do it full-time yet. So the goal is in the next couple of years to be a full-time potter. But I still have college debt that I need to pay down. And so my full-time job, I'm an account director for an art company. And I'm helping to launch the new stores called Public Lands in the United States. Dick's Sporting Goods owns them, and I'm traveling a lot for that. So my next gigs are, let's see, Boston, Kennesaw, Georgia, Medford, Oregon, and Huntington, New York. Ben said he would pay it for me. I mean, if we could get the union to be more steady, I feel like we could make that work, but unfortunately, work in the States with construction is still iffy. Womp womp. Yes, best husband ever. He also he makes me really beautiful furniture. So if you ever want to see what he's been working on, you can go on Instagram to Bennett Slap Stuff Together or Slap Stuff Together on Instagram, and you can follow along with his woodworking journeys. He just built himself a miter saw station, which to me, like, he makes things so beautiful and immaculate, and then they're a studio piece that is going to get dirty and covered in sawdust and or clay. Like, he made me a bench that's just gorgeous. But I'm like, it took you 6 months and it's beautiful. I don't want to put it in my studio. Can I write that out? What do you mean to write that out? All right, well, we've got a few more minutes here, so any other questions? I hope you noticed my sticker wall behind me. I did a lot of work collecting those stickers and swapping stickers and going to events. In fact, that's how I know Jake and Jamie, when Berkey kidnapped me in England. Jamie was a passenger and Jake was the getaway driver. They took me to Stonehenge. It was really super fun. Oh, yeah. Let's see. Well, Ben, can you put our Instagrams in the chat, please? Oh, my hands are covered in clay. Yeah, so all right, well, I hope you guys had an amazing day and are continuing on the journey through the links to see everybody else. I will be in the chats with everybody else as well. Please go ahead and like and subscribe, everybody. And I don't post too many videos to YouTube. My main place is Instagram. It's Whitehall_pottery on Instagram. And again, you can buy my pieces at the link below. If you're interested, I'm not currently taking commissions on at the moment due to all of the work travel, but we'll see what happens next year. All right, guys, have a great day and stay muddy. Bye.